Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. And today we were going to talking about Bystials. Within the Yu-Gi-Oh community and the competitive one especially, there's been a lot of discussion, talk about where Bystials stand right now in the main deck. People aren't sure if they should be main decking them, side decking them, or playing them at all. And this is especially relevant as we approach 3 YCSs coming up within February as Kotton Hypernova releases. So until Kotton Hypernova, main decking Bystials have been a pretty dominant choice and a lot of main deck options for, even from tier to not tier. So we have to figure out what exactly changes with this new release that may make things less favorable for Bystials that people are considering not playing them anymore. 3 new elements are added to the discussion. For one, we have triple tactics thrust. There's a lot of talk that this will make Bystials worse. For one, it means if you activate a Bystial and they have this card in their hand, they can play any spell from their deck. So Instant Fusion, Terraforming, and Triple Tactics Talent are the main things that people are kind of looking for. Another reason that Bystials may not be as strong is that Kotton has now entered the mix as far as meta deck goes. And if you aren't sure what a sample deck looks like, you can search one up on YouTube. I'm not going to provide one here. But mostly it's just a level 7 deck, stun deck, kind of like Fluanderies. It's going to be banishing everything. Bystials suck against it, like almost unplayable. So that could be a reason not to play Bystials as well. Now the third element that changes with this is going to be the release of a 4th Bystial Baldrake, which has the classic effect Banish Light or Dark to summon it, another hand trap in that regard. And now also it has another effect where if your opponent special summons a Ritual, Fusion, Synchro, or Xyz monster or Link monster, except during the damage step, you contribute another Light or Dark to target one of those monsters and banish it. So it's probably the best one when you go second if you can combine it with either another Bystial or another body on field, say Havnus. So with this first glance, you may say, oh, these are 2 things now going against playing Bystials in the main deck, only one thing going for, but it's a lot less simple than that. Each of these decision points is a little more complicated, but also may hold a different level of weight than the others. With this dilemma, let's kind of take a step back and ask ourselves why we played Bystials in the first place. So the reason we had Bystials in our deck was that it was the most effective way to deal with elements when we went second, because you had a body on field that could clean up your opponent's monsters, and you were also shutting off the element effects, and their entire overall end field capabilities were weakened, or it could just strangle their entire plan altogether. So now we got to ask ourselves, has that changed at all with any of these new added elements? Well, versus Element, you could argue that it has gotten a bit worse because of tasking. Tasking now means that when you're using Bystials, there's a lot more of a punish for you, even to some extent the Mechanco cards, though I don't think they'll be popular enough to play around at the moment. This may be enough counterplay that means Bystials aren't actually a good tool against elements when you're going second. However, you could also argue that there are so many going first cards the opponent could be playing already instead of tasking, that one more card that helps going first isn't enough to make the Bystials irrelevant. So for one, if they just had triple talents already, it was already a pretty good way of punishing Bystials, to where your hand needed to be a lot stronger than just a Bystial, or even 2, to get away with that being a succeeding going second strategy. Yet it was still dominant to play Bystials because talents had other risks attached to it to be played, and it wasn't super popular. And even then, it's not a super consistent option. It's only 3 cards to the deck. So with tasking, you could be playing up to 6 talents, so maybe that consistency does change it. But how frequent will that be? You could also argue that they might just be playing 1 talents and 3 tasking, or 3 thrusts, at which point it's only 1 more card and doesn't impact it that much. I'm not sold on that being a reason to not play the Bystials. And you can also just argue that if your opponent builds the deck to go first, like focus on that, then you should almost never be able to beat them. And sadly, that is true. If I were to build a tier deck that I knew was going first every single game, I can make it strong enough to the point that they need like 3 to 4 hand traps to have a chance. If I had to choose those hand traps, it probably still would be Bystials. So even though that these new going first counters may exist in the form of thrust or Mechancos, I don't think it alone is going to be common enough or even changes enough that it makes the Bystials less good. Now, even if it does decrease their quality slightly, we also want to know if there are alternatives or substitutes that don't fall to the same weaknesses that the Bystials have here. So in this case, the weakness we've kind of noted is that they are weak to tasking or thrust. So if we can find an alternative, then maybe we have a good solution, something like Super Poly Imperm. That requires that to actually be an alternative, and I'm not saying it is. We can touch upon that later. Now, the next thing with Kotton is that means there may be less tier element in a tournament. You have another deck that the Bystials were good against, maybe now isn't. So before, maybe in a tournament, you had 80% of the matchups, you were happy at Bystials. Now it's 65% or 60%. It's hard to say right now if that'll be an accurate prediction of numbers. That's kind of what I'm feeling, but I'm also not super certain, and it'll very easily change as we get more information from the tournaments. But that has no impact on whether the Bystials are good going second versus tier elements. All it means is we may play less tier elements. So this may be more weight into the fact that Bystials are bad against rogue decks or non-tier element strategies, but it doesn't change the core principle of why Bystials were good. So it's not changing how good Bystials actually are in the purpose they serve, just that maybe the purpose they serve is no longer as much of a focus for us anymore. The third part is Baldrake. Now, it shouldn't need to be discussed much that this card does make Bystials stronger. Now, if you have two Bystials and one of them is Baldrake, it is extremely hard for tier element to play through. And Baldrake may even make some Bystials better versus rogue decks, because if you have Havnus plus Baldrake from the perspective of a tier player, then that's actually kind of playable against Kashtira, just because you put up the Baldrake against your own card, and then it's still an interrupt. It's not fantastic, but it does more than any other Bystial would in that spot. So now that we dissect what makes the Bystials good and what purpose they serve, we want to try dissect this information and create a sort of cost-benefit analysis as to why or why not we should be playing these. If we assume there are no other utility cards we could play that can help us in both tier going second and Kashtira going second, and also not be weak to tasking, then we're presented with a choice of focusing on preventing either the issues we just presented or being in better position versus tier going second. No matter what in these spots, and they often occur, you have to make a choice and a call. You can put yourself favorably against one thing and unfavorably versus the other, and then use your side deck to prepare for game 2. If we remove utility cards like tasking from our deck for Bystials, then another downside we may look at with Bystials versus other utility cards we put in is how they impact your play going first, because it does matter, not just going second. Tasking may be a better card for going first than the Bystials, where something like Impermanence is not. The Bystials are probably the middle ground because they are still bodies you can use for extension sometimes. However, tasking is probably dominant because if you get stopped, you can do a lot more than just summon a body. Now, the hard part here is deciding which perspective we value the highest. And I can't give you an answer, largely because that depends on the meta, and that'll be changing every week. For duels that are not playing in Mexico or in Leon, don't lock in your deck yet. Wait until these events happen, and then kind of get a glimpse of what tech cards people are playing and what decks are popular. And then using that information, you can decide how much of an importance you can be putting on Bystials in the main or side or at all. If there's a lot of tiers, then I'd argue we stick with the strategy of Bystials in the main. However, if we notice a sharp fall off in tiers and we notice that maybe tasking is popular in the main deck, then prominence of Bystials should be dropped as well. That part of discussion is something that ultimately you have to decide and will ultimately change, but I hope that with this video, I give you the tools to understand what are the parameters necessary to make Bystials a solid main deck choice and why you shouldn't play them in certain metas as well. I hope you guys enjoy this type of video. If you do, please let me know in the comments below, like and subscribe, and then hit the notification bell if you want to see when my videos go live. Also, please check out tsx1.com where you can see all the sleeves that I use at events and get 10% off with the code POTATO10, or you can get a third for the price of 2. Peace.